The morning fog lingered over the English Channel, obscuring the horizon where thousands of vessels would soon appear. But on that pivotal June morning in 1944, German Field Marshal Erwin Rommel was not in Normandy. He was at home in Germany, celebrating his wife's birthday, convinced that no invasion was imminent. A small detail, seemingly insignificant at the time, yet one that would cascade into one of history's greatest military miscalculations. The absence of the Desert Fox from his command post represented the culmination of a shadow war that had been waged not with bullets and bombs, but with whispers and illusions, a war fought in the realm of perception and belief. For nearly 2 years before Allied forces stormed the beaches of Normandy, an invisible army had been deployed against the German war machine, an army composed not of men, but of fabrications, each one carefully crafted to penetrate the German mind and reshape its understanding of reality. This is the story of how the Allies conquered the German imagination long before they set foot on French soil, and how the echoes of this cognitive conquest reverberate through our understanding of truth and deception even today. The Western Front in early 1944 was a nervous system of anticipation. Hitler had transformed the coastline into what he called the Atlantic Wall, a 2,400-mile network of bunkers, minefields, and artillery positions. The Führer's propaganda machine heralded it as impenetrable, a concrete manifestation of Nazi invincibility. German soldiers manning these defenses absorbed this narrative of superiority, but they also harbored a creeping anxiety about the inevitable Allied assault. They knew it was coming. The question that haunted their waking thoughts and disturbed their dreams was not if, but where and when. This uncertainty created a psychological vulnerability that Allied planners recognized and exploited with surgical precision. Into this atmosphere of anticipation and dread, Allied intelligence services introduced a calculated program of misdirection, a campaign of psychological manipulation so comprehensive that it would leave German commanders paralyzed with indecision at the very moment decisive action was required. The architects of this grand deception operated from nondescript buildings in London, where the Special Operations Executive, SOE, and the 20 Committee, which ran the double-cross system, orchestrated a symphony of falsehoods. Here, the maestros of deception like Colonel John Bevan of the London Controlling Section and Lieutenant Commander Ewan Montague wove their elaborate tapestry of lies. Their masterpiece was Operation Fortitude, a plan of such audacious scope that it aimed to convince Hitler and his generals that the real invasion of Normandy was merely a diversion from a larger assault that would come later at the Pas de Calais. The operation played upon Hitler's preconceptions, his belief that the Allies would choose the shortest route across the English Channel, and his conviction that they would target the port facilities needed to supply an invasion force. These assumptions were not challenged, but rather reinforced, nurtured like delicate plants that would eventually bear the poisonous fruit of strategic paralysis. Consider the layers of this deception, each one reinforcing the others in a self-referential ecosystem of falsehood. There was the physical deception. Inflatable tanks and landing craft positioned in Kent, opposite the Pas de Calais, visible to German reconnaissance aircraft that were intentionally allowed to penetrate British airspace. There was the electronic deception. Radio operators transmitting a volume of signals consistent with the communications of an entire army group, the fictitious 1st United States Army Group, USAG, supposedly commanded by the flamboyant General George S. Patton, whom the Germans considered the Allies' most aggressive and capable field commander. The Germans intercepted these transmissions, analyzed them, and found what seemed to be compelling evidence of a massive build-up opposite the Pas de Calais. In reality, they were intercepting a performance, a radio play broadcast specifically for their benefit, the dialogue crafted to feed their fears and expectations. But perhaps the most intricate aspect of Operation Fortitude was the human deception carried out through the double-cross system. By 1944, British intelligence had captured every German agent sent to Britain and had given them a choice: work for the British or face execution. Those who chose to live became double agents, continuing to send information to their German handlers, but now under British control. The most notable of these was Juan Pujol Garcia, codenamed Garbo, a Spanish citizen who had offered his services to the British after first establishing his credibility with the Germans. Garbo created an entirely fictional network of sub-agents across Britain, each providing the Germans with pieces of information that, when assembled, supported the fortitude narrative of an invasion at Pas de Calais. His reports were so valued by German intelligence that Hitler personally awarded him the Iron Cross for his services to the Reich, even as he was simultaneously being considered for an MBE, Member of the Order of the British Empire, by King George VI for his services to the Allied cause. Imagine the psychological implications of this web of deception for the German High Command. They were making strategic decisions based on intelligence that appeared to come from multiple independent sources, all confirming the same narrative. The physical evidence matched the electronic evidence, which matched the human intelligence. This convergence created a powerful illusion of certainty, a false confidence in their understanding of Allied intentions. The genius of fortitude was that it did not try to hide the preparations for the Normandy landings, which would have been impossible given their scale. Instead, it acknowledged these preparations, but framed them as part of a larger deception designed to draw German forces away from the real target at Pas-de-Calais. The Germans were not deceived about the existence of invasion preparations. They were deceived about their meaning. It was a manipulation of interpretation, rather than a concealment of fact, and it played on the human tendency to find patterns and create narratives that make sense of complex situations. The psychological impact of this deception extended beyond the High Command to affect German troops on the ground. Soldiers manning the Atlantic Wall had been subjected to years of Nazi propaganda about German technological and tactical superiority. They believed in the impregnability of their defenses and the infallibility of their leaders. The sudden appearance of the Allied invasion force at Normandy, rather than the expected Pas-de-Calais, created a cognitive dissonance that hampered their response. Reports from the front to headquarters were often disbelieved or dismissed because they contradicted the prevailing narrative that the real invasion was still to come. In the critical hours when immediate decisive action might have driven the Allies back into the sea, German forces were held in reserve, waiting for an attack that would never come. Consider the experience of a German infantryman stationed near Calais on June 6, 1944. He wakes to reports of landings in Normandy, but is told by his officers that this is a diversion, that he should remain vigilant for the main assault that will surely come in his sector. Days pass, then weeks, and still he waits, scanning the horizon for an invasion fleet that exists only in the collective imagination of the German High Command. Meanwhile, his comrades in Normandy are being overwhelmed as the Allied beachhead expands. The psychological toll of this waiting, this constant state of alert for a phantom threat, cannot be overstated. It creates a sense of helplessness, of events spiraling beyond control that erodes morale and fighting spirit. The effectiveness of this deception is evidenced by the fact that even weeks after the Normandy landings, German forces were still being held in reserve around Pas-de-Calais, waiting for the real invasion. Hitler himself remained convinced that Normandy was a feint, a belief reinforced by Garbo, who sent a message on June 9th warning that the Normandy landings were indeed a diversion. This message was deemed so important by German intelligence that it was placed directly on Hitler's desk, further cementing his strategic miscalculation. The 15th Army, a powerful German formation stationed near Calais, remained largely inactive during the critical early stages of the Normandy campaign, its combat power wasted on defending against an attack that would never materialize. The psychological warfare did not end with the successful establishment of the Allied beachhead. Even as the battle for Normandy raged, the deception continued, adapting to the new reality but maintaining its central narrative. Garbo and other double agents reported that the Normandy operation was achieving its diversionary purpose, drawing German attention away from the Pas-de-Calais where the main blow would soon fall under the command of Patton. This persistent illusion prevented the German High Command from committing fully to the defense of Normandy, dividing their attention and resources at a time when concentration of force might have changed the course of the battle. The success of Operation Fortitude and the broader deception plan, Operation Bodyguard, represents one of history's most effective applications of psychological warfare. It demonstrates the power of understanding and exploiting the psychological biases and expectations of an adversary. The Germans were susceptible to the deception because it aligned with their preconceptions and confirmed their existing beliefs. They saw what they expected to see, heard what they expected to hear, and interpreted ambiguous information in ways that reinforced their established worldview. This cognitive bias, what psychologists today might call confirmation bias, was their undoing. The consequences of this psychological victory extended far beyond the beaches of Normandy. The successful Allied landings marked the beginning of the end for Hitler's Third Reich, opening a second front that would eventually squeeze Germany between the advancing Allies from the West and the Soviet forces from the East. But the methods used to achieve this victory, the systematic manipulation of perception and belief, also left a legacy that continues to influence how we think about truth, deception, and the malleability of human understanding. In the decades following World War II, the techniques of psychological warfare developed during operations like Fortitude were refined and expanded by intelligence agencies around the world. The Cold War became a battleground of competing narratives, with both sides attempting to shape the perceptions and beliefs of populations at home and abroad. The concept of disinformation, a term derived from the Russian desinformatia, entered the global lexicon as a description of the deliberate spreading of false information to mislead adversaries and influence public opinion. The digital age has only accelerated and democratized these capabilities, creating an environment where the line between truth and falsehood is increasingly blurred, and where the manipulation of perception has become a common feature of political, commercial, and social discourse. This evolution raises profound questions about the nature of truth in our contemporary world. If perception can be so thoroughly manipulated, if intelligent and experienced military commanders can be deceived on matters of vital importance, what confidence can ordinary citizens have in their understanding of complex events? The story of Operation Fortitude suggests that our grasp of reality is more tenuous than we might like to believe, that our perceptions are shaped by narratives that may be deliberately constructed to serve the interests of others. It reminds us of the importance of critical thinking, of questioning the sources of our information, and of recognizing the potential for manipulation in the construction of the narratives that frame our understanding of the world. Yet there is also a certain irony in the success of operations like Fortitude. The very effectiveness of the deception depended on the Germans' faith in their intelligence systems, their belief that they were receiving accurate information upon which they could base sound decisions. In a sense, they were victims of their own confidence in their ability to discern truth from falsehood. This suggests a delicate balance in our approach to information. Too much skepticism leads to paralysis, an inability to act in the face of uncertainty. Too little skepticism leaves us vulnerable to manipulation. Finding the middle ground, maintaining a healthy skepticism while still being able to form convictions and take action, is perhaps one of the greatest challenges facing individuals and societies in an age of information warfare. The German soldiers who stood watch on the Atlantic Wall in the spring of 1944 never understood that they had already been defeated in a battle they didn't even know they were fighting, a battle for perception and belief. They were looking for an invasion fleet on the horizon, but the real invasion had already occurred in the minds of their leaders, in the distorted maps of reality that guided German strategy. By the time the first Allied soldiers set foot on the beaches of Normandy, the most important victory had already been won, not with bombs and bullets, but with carefully crafted lies and strategic misdirection. As we reflect on this shadowy chapter of history, we might wonder about the unseen battles being fought today, the narratives being constructed to shape our perceptions and guide our actions. We might ask ourselves whether we, like those German soldiers, scanning the horizon for an invasion that would come elsewhere, are focusing our attention on the wrong threats while being blindsided by dangers we've been conditioned to overlook. The legacy of Operation Fortitude is not just a fascinating historical footnote, but a warning and a wake-up call, a reminder of our cognitive vulnerability and the constant need for vigilance, not just against external threats, but against the manipulation of our understanding of those threats. In the end, the story of how German troops never understood how they lost D-Day is also our story, a reflection of the universal human struggle to discern truth in a world where perception is malleable and reality is often what others want us to believe it is. Soldiers waiting for an invasion at Calais, the generals holding forces in reserve for a phantom attack, and Hitler himself convinced until the end that he understood the Allied strategy better than his commanders on the ground, all stand as cautionary figures, reminders of the peril of certainty in a world of shadows and illusions. Their experience echoes across time to challenge us. What invasions might we be missing while we scan the horizon for threats that exist only in our manipulated imagination? What critical facts might we be dismissing because they don't fit the narrative we've been conditioned to believe? The answer to these questions may determine our own capacity to understand how we might lose our own decisive moments, our own D-Days, without ever comprehending what truly happened until it's far too late. And so the real question becomes, are you seeing the world as it is, or as someone else wants you to see it. The answer might be more elusive and more consequential than you think.